Bienvenidos, señores y señores, to the Bleed Lows Podcast. This episode of the Bleed Lows Podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. Basketball is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. And as your continued source for all your sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. It's always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events, whether that's the NFL, NBA, NHL, MMA, tennis, boxing, or even golf. So head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V, to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts. And joining us on the Carne Asada is former general manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers, El Padrino of the Carne Asada, Ned Colletti. ¿Cómo estás, Ned? How are you?
Doing well. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on today.
Ned, so we wanted to have you on because we couldn't think of anyone better than the guy who actually brought Justin Turner to the Dodgers. I think this is I'm not surprised that it took every Dodger fan. Like, the reaction that I've just been seeing is just sadness. It really is. But I want to start off by, what is it that you saw in Justin Turner that you thought, it's going to translate for success over here with the Dodgers? Because on the Mets, he wasn't the player that he was with the Dodgers.
No, he wasn't. And I think there were a few things. I think, first of all, from our team standpoint, we had four really good players that could play all over the infield. Jerry Hairston, Michael Young, who we had acquired at the August trade deadline earlier, the year before, Skip Schumacher, and Nick Punto. And Nick and Skip were looking for 2-year deals. Michael Young was going to retire. Jerry was going to retire and do TV. So I needed to get younger. And I also needed somebody that I knew could hit. And JT could always hit. We knew that. We weren't necessarily sure about the position. We thought he could play all over the infield. Second base is really where we had him earmarked for. Could probably play a little bit of short and a little bit of third. But what also intrigued us was where he's from. And I don't think LA is easy for a lot of people to play in LA. It's a city with incredible expectations, year in, year out. And I think it takes a special type of character to do that. So we knew that he understood that, and we knew he could hit, and we were looking for people that could really play and help us win. And then he had been non-tendered, wasn't a non-starter for us. It actually gave us opportunity, and as it turned out, it gave him opportunity.
You put out a really touching post on your Instagram about Justin Turner. And I feel like that's something that's kind of lost in the game now, is that ability just to recognize. And it seems that everybody that's talking about Justin Turner is talking about Justin Turner, the person, not the baseball player. Do you see a lot of that in the game, and we're just, naive to it?
You know what? I think it is somewhat unique. I mean, I've had friendships with players going back for 40 years, and there's probably, if you went from 1 to 100, there's probably 5% of the players you wish you'd never met before, right, or watch play. There's about 90% that kind of blend into that 90 percentile. Some at the top of it, some in the middle of it, some at the bottom of it, and then there's a 5% that you spend some time with, and you see them develop. And a lot of the young players that we drafted, Clayton, Corey, Bellinger, on and on, Jock, so many, Kenley, that, you start to get to know who they are as well. And JT was just always somebody that we continued to stay in touch after I left the GM chair, continued to stay in touch when I did TV. Been invited to numerous player weddings during my career, and went to 2 of them. Went to Jamie Moyer's a long time ago in South Bend, Indiana, when he married Digger Phelps' daughter, Karen. And then JT, when he and Kourtney got married, went down to Cabo and celebrated their wedding. And I think it's it's a special thing to have that type of rapport with a player. Typically, a front office and your playing roster. You know, two different, one side, but two different things. You got the business side, which sometimes, you know, you don't always agree with. But in his case, it just seemed to be a respect that was born really at the very beginning. Remember, I had offered him a major league contract, and it was based on him passing a physical. And when he went for the physical that day, I got a call from either Neil Elatrash or Stan Conti, our trainer, saying that his knee was going to be, you know, something that's going to probably need surgery at some point in time. Did I want to take that risk? And so the difference between a major league contract and a minor league contract is the minor league contract isn't guaranteed. Major league contract, if he's in spring training and he gets hurt, he's going to end up being on your 25-man roster, but as an injured player. And so I called him and I says, look, you know, I don't know any other way to tell you this, but, you know, we're going to make this a minor league deal. We're going to take away the guarantee part, but understand how I feel and understand that you can trust me. If your knee is fine, and he says, I feel great. I said, then bet on yourself and come here and take this chance for spring training, knowing that if you get hurt in a different place and you got to go on the injured list, I'll cover you. You got me. And you're going to trust me, and I'm going to have to trust you. And so that happened before we had ever really sat down face to face. That was in late January or February of 2014. And then, you know, he came to spring training, you know, stayed healthy, made the team. We ended up opening that season in Australia, as you may remember, against the Diamondbacks. And he and I and Kourtney ended up playing blackjack at the hotel we were staying at before we ended up beating Arizona those two games. So our relationship kind of started early where we had to trust each other. And then it grew from there. And, you know, when you sit down and you have a meal with somebody or you're playing cards with somebody and you have a chance just to have idle conversation, you get to know each other. And that's the first time I met Kourtney as well. And it just continued to grow where even when I started doing TV, if I would see him or he would see me, we'd wave or he'd come up and say hello and we'd chat for a little while. And, you know, it was just that type of rapport. I'll tell you one other thing, too. When I got the job as a GM a long time ago now, I got a call from Hall of Fame GM John Scherholz. Okay? John Scherholz and I had known each other for a long time. I asked John, I said, so give me one piece of advice. I said, you know, you've had this great career, hadn't been in the Hall of Fame yet, but had this great career. And he says, I always ask myself, and I haven't always been perfect at it. And sometimes I knew I was, you know, not going to be able to accomplish it with this particular player / person. But I always ask myself, can I trust the player? Can I trust the person? Not to watch your house or not to, you know, stuff like that. But can you trust that the effort is always going to be at the utmost? That whatever they have to give, you're going to get as an organization. And I can tell you that from day one, Justin Turner had my trust and did nothing but continued to verify it, that, you know what, we had made the right choice in bringing him back to L.A., his hometown, and giving him a chance. Historic player, in my opinion. When you look at what he's done and how he's done it, every year his team was in the postseason. Every year he played here, postseason player. And you just look at the production and the class of which he's handled himself. He and Kourtney in this community, they figured out they could leave a positive impact. They could change people's lives who they didn't even know necessarily. But because of their position in life and the blessings they had, they could be blessings to other people. That, to me, is one of the great traits of Justin and Kourtney Turner.
Well, you're the only one on this show right now that's worn the GM hat. So walk me through this, Ned. You talked about the intangibles. Like you brought him over here because he knew the area. Now it's the end of his career. Do we overstate his importance in the locker room? Like, would that be a reason why you bring this guy back alone? Let's say maybe the numbers dropped off a little bit, but what he brings to the clubhouse, is that enough to bring someone back?
In some ways it is. And I don't want to get into the middle of the negotiation because I wasn't a part of the negotiation on either side. So I don't know all the detail. I sense that the second year was where the split came. But I think that when the toughest thing that I had to find year in, year out were 20 game winners, somebody who could give you 200 plus innings and was going to go out there and lead a rotation. Legitimate 30 home run guys that had legit power, that could drive in runs and put runs on the board and change a game with a swing. And the last thing that was just as hard to find is leadership. People who will take some of the leadership, and I don't mean this that you take the leadership away from the manager, but you give another voice, a peer-to-peer situation, whether it's telling somebody, hey, you got to pick it up, you got to be a little bit sharper with this, a little bit keener with this, or whether it's a young player. And it's a young player that, going to be nervous, going to be anxious about it, but they look across the room and they get the nod from a veteran, a guy like JT, or I'm sure Kenley or Clayton or many others that, hey, we got you. Everything's going to be cool. You just play. You just do what you can do and you just play. And I think that happens. And I think that is a key part. I think a lot of this franchise success for a decade, you go to playoffs 10 straight years. That doesn't happen that often in baseball. A little bit easier now because you have an expanded field. But when this first began, there were 4 teams going from the National League. So I think you need all those attributes, including the leadership. And I mentioned this to somebody the other day, that when I looked at this Dodger team the last few years, one of the many remarkable traits of it, and there are many, was how many young players came up and had really no transition to the big leagues almost. They came up, they fit in, they produced. Dave Roberts, Andrew Friedman gave players a little bit of patience, a little bit of grace to kind of get their bearings. And I think the success of a lot of these young players is also attributed to the veterans in that room who made them feel welcome, not taking somebody's job. And, like in the olden days where, a rookie really had to earn their way because the veteran was not going to make it easy for him. I don't think that happens anymore. I think this group, especially this group, and Justin being a key part of it, they understood they needed everybody in that room to help them be as good as they could be as a team. So I do think that he brought a lot of that. That said, decisions are made, and we can never forget it's the business of the sport. But again, it's he's somebody that is historic in my opinion. You look at the big hits he had, how he embraced the community, how he embraced the team, and the team's success, and his own personal success. That to me is historic in nature, and that's not an overstatement.
You mentioned it. I think you're right in terms of the historic. I think if you look at it, his numbers are up there with all-time Dodgers in terms of just the Dodgers organization. But I honestly, what sticks with me is more, we were lucky enough to have him and Kourtney on the show. He had his dogs with him when he was on the show. But the thing that I'm going to remember, yeah, he had the home run against the Cubs and all that stuff. But to me, this is a guy who won the Roberto Clemente Award. This is a guy that at the end of the second inning would always go over and shake the veteran of the game and give them a baseball. He had the Justin Turner Foundation. Look, we've had this before with other players. Valenzuela, to us, he should be retired because of the cultural contribution that he made to this organization. Maybe Justin Turner doesn't have the same impact as Valenzuela, but I do feel that he made a cultural contribution to this organization. He also happens to wear a 10 that another guy used to wear. Is there a way to maybe honor both of those guys with doing something with that number, Ned?
Well, I don't have any voice in any of that. I think it's certainly a great question. I'm from Chicago. I grew up in that city. I grew up with that baseball team there, the one on the north side. And there's a 31 that's retired for Fergie Jenkins and Greg Maddux. So, it's possible. It's obviously been an iconic number for probably 20 some years in the organization, if not more. But again, those are questions way beyond my thought process or my contribution. But I go back to what he meant to the organization and what he did, and the community. And I think that that will always stand. I mean, he's going to Boston for a short period of time, a year, 2 years, whatever. Maybe there's another stop after that. But he will always be a Dodger. And he will always be revered in this city for how he played, but also who he is and how he went about it. The work he's done with veterans, the work he's done, as you mentioned, the second inning, which I saw many times. And, wasn't there to do it on the camera, wasn't there for the spotlight, was just doing it there because it was from his heart. And I think when you have that type of person and that type of character, they may leave an organization as a worker / player, but they're never really going to leave that organization because they're always going to have the memories and really the solidifying aspect of the player, historic in so many ways, big hits, postseason big hits. I know his totals are somewhat exaggerated compared to the Garveys and Ronnie and those other guys in Duke because they played more games. But you still got to be able to hit. You still got to be able to play and be a championship type player on both sides of the ball. Think of the play he made in Atlanta, on the rundown. I mean, that was one of the most important innings of that entire NLCS because the Braves were threatening and there was nobody else when that whole inning started. And then he makes that type of play. There's so many things we can get into, but by and large, you're talking about a historic production of a player, offense and defense. And you're talking about somebody, he and his wife, that have made a major impact in the city and the region of Los Angeles.
This is, I guess this is a hard reality for all baseball fans, but we are now entering a phase where the team is looking different. We've got Bellinger's left, Turner's left. Kershaw makes everyone a little nervous. Every year it's with Kershaw. Is this going to be the last time? So is this just really more of a lesson, Ned, that we just need to appreciate these guys instead of just bitching and moaning and complaining that, they lost in the playoffs last year, but it's like, just appreciate for what they give us every day, going out there, because what Justin Turner gave us, I have a hard time believing we're going to see someone else like him.
Well, I think that winning should never be taken for granted. And I think it's tough to win in the big leagues. To do 10 straight playoff appearances and 9 division championships and 3 World Series and 1 championship, that is not easy to do. I don't care what your payroll is. It doesn't matter. It's all difficult to do. So I think it needs to be cherished while it's happening. And yeah, people get upset game to game, or you get upset, San Diego beats you, unexpectedly, so to speak. Yeah, but that's part of the sport. That's why people go to games, because they're unpredictable. But to do what the organization has done for as long as it's done it. It's virtually impossible to do it, but they've done it. And I think that is a mark on that is a salute to everybody that's had a hand in it. Because again, it's not easy. So I hope people do appreciate it. And yeah, it seems like an off season of transition. Both the Turners. I mean, you went through the list, and so it's a changing of the guard a little bit. I've known a lot of those players for a long time. I think I'm down to Clayton and Julio and Caleb Ferguson. I think so. It took a while, but it's transition time, and that's really how you continue to win, is to be willing to transition from time to time, no matter how much people love who the players are. And it's been a special period of time, no doubt, and the work and the success of the ownership, the front office, the manager, the coaching staff, and the players has been historic in a historic franchise's history.
Well, we're gonna let you go with this one, Babyface. You wanted to ask the Padrino a question.
Yeah, well, just real quick, Ned. When you're talking also about Kourtney, like I was just thinking about that, how Justin Turner and Kourtney Turner, they both are so special to the city. I mean, Justin would always mention, the work that Kourtney puts into it, and we're gonna miss that as well. I mean, we're gonna miss Justin, but we're gonna miss Kourtney. And I remember back when we talked to him on the red carpet at one of the Kershaw events, and you'd see Kourtney when Justin talks, just the way she looks at him, like when you think of those memes, like, you know, find yourself somebody that looks at you like this, like that's how Kourtney looks at Justin. She just looks at him with this, like, just, I don't know, it's something special to see them together. And Justin's mentioned it before, you know, like I said, the work they've done, winning the Clemente Award this year, she was a big part of that. And I think you had mentioned before, you were kind of telling Kourtney to sign, right? Like it was something about, like, when you were trying to get him to come over, you were telling him, hey, get this guy to sign, right?
I'll tell you the story. Yeah, it's I was walking from my office on the 5th floor of Dodger Stadium down to the lunchroom mid-January of 2014, maybe early January. And somebody who worked in marketing, Kat Belanger, who ended up marrying Tyler Toffoli, the great king, she comes out and we say hello, and she says, hey, I hear you're trying to sign my best friend, my girlfriend's boyfriend. And I said, who would that be? And she says, well, Kourtney and the player is Justin Turner. I says, yeah, you're right. You're right. I says, you talk to them? She goes, oh, all the time. I says, well, make sure he knows that we're serious and we really want this player to come be a Dodger, come on home. And about a week went by and I ran into her in the same place, or maybe the same time. And I said, hey, did you have a chance? And she says, yeah, I did. Well, I said, tell him the clock is ticking. You know, we're going to have to make a decision here. He's my lead guy because I've lost these 4 other veteran players that could play all over the infield. He's my top choice, but you know, I gotta have somebody if I don't have him. And so she said, oh yeah, I will. So within another week, we had signed him, and he had the alumni game where Tim Wallach went, and I don't know if Tim was aware of my conversations with the agent or not, but you know, he put a good word in for the organization too. And coming from somebody of Tim's status and experience and love for the Dodgers, you know, I'm sure that had a lot to do with JT's decision as well. But you know, that started right at the beginning, and so I can't remember, and I've done hundreds upon hundreds of contract negotiations. I can't remember one that had that type of dynamic to it. But they've been a tremendous couple. And I talked to him after he was named the Roberto Clemente Award winner for all of Major League Baseball a couple months ago, which is one of the great awards of all time. And I says, when you look back on your career, there's going to be many things that you're going to be proud of. But there'll be few things you're going to be prouder of than the Roberto Clemente Award. And that's a team award in your case, because it's Kourtney's and it's yours. Both of you, the Turners, were Roberto Clemente Award winners. And I think that what they've done together and how they see the world and how they understand their position in life and the blessings that they had. I said this earlier, the blessings they've had, and they move them to other people. And I think that is one of the great trademarks of any individual. And they have been phenomenal at what they do on the field with JT and on and off the field with Kourtney and JT.
So you were talking about the transition, right? Like there's a time for change. And the last time that I think the way it looks now is it looks like this is going to be the year that there's going to be a lot of these young kids that they've been talking about, the Bobby Miller, Miguel Vargas, all those guys. It seems like they're going to get their chance now. And when I was looking back on the last time that I actually remember where maybe it was a group of young kids was, I think, in your time, right? When you had Easier come up, when you had Kemp come up, when you had Russell Martin. Every other year, I think since then, they've kind of just, phased somebody in. They bring in Jock one year, they bring in Seager one year, and, and then so forth. How do you think that transition now is going to work with, this year? This is the year that it looks like, these kids are going to get their shot.
Well, you're right. My first, I was hired in November of 2005, and opening day was April of 2006. And I think about 5 weeks in, we called up Russell and Andre Ethier, who I had acquired from Oakland a couple months before. And that's where it began. And I think Jonathan Broxton had already touched the big leagues a little bit, maybe Billingsley, and then James. And then a little while later, here came Matt. And little by little, we did transition on the fly because we ended up winning the division or tying with San Diego the first year in 2006 to took a little bit of a step back in 07 and then went to the LCS in 08 and 09 with really a young team. Jeff Kent certainly contributed to that. Casey Blake, Manny Ramirez was a big part of the 08 and the 09 team. So we did transition, and we did it on the fly, and so to speak. So you have to do it. But understand, and going back to one of your previous questions about appreciating where the organization is and has been, appreciate how hard it is to play in the big leagues too. And I think you can take a player that's played in the minor leagues, but you need to give them a little bit of grace, because playing in the minor leagues for a full season of AAA or AA or half and half is not like playing in the big leagues. 162 games, 55,000 people at Dodger Stadium for half of them. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of expectation. So it's going to take a little bit of time probably. And you got to be patient with it, because the toughest thing to have in the sport is patience, because you evaluate it almost every day. But if you don't have patience, you're going to end up making more mistakes than if you do have patience. And I think that it's going to be an interesting season, because we're going to see a lot of young players really given a chance, a true chance, not a chance once a week or here and there, but it seems like a true chance to be Dodgers. And that's going to take a little bit of patience and a little bit of grace. But if you believe in your system and you believe in all the work people have done from scouting and player development and doing it the Dodger way, you got to be patient with it, because it'll start to bear fruit again, and you'll be able to make another decade-long run, if not longer.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you to El Padrino, Ned Colletti, for joining us. And as I said, a big thank you to everybody, because this is the guy who brought us Justin Turner. This is the reason why we were able to experience all the great joys from this man. So, Ned, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for thinking of me and putting me on. I miss talking to you guys anytime. I'd be happy to join you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Ned.
And once again, a big thank you to El Padrino, El Nino, Ned Colletti, for joining us. It's always fun having Ned on there. And, I couldn't think of a better person to have on to talk about Justin Turner. So, look, all I saw on the Twitters, all I saw on the social media is people being super, super sad. And part of me was reacting like, are these the same people that were just trashing Justin Turner during the playoffs, that were saying he was done, we have to move on? So I get that. I get that. I think now is a time where we get to acknowledge the fact of everything that this guy has done for the Dodgers. So we're going to ignore last postseason's performance and the season before, okay? Because this is really, it's about saying thank you to Justin Turner. It's about appreciating all the good things that he did, because that guy did more good than bad, right? So what was your initial reaction? I know you, I think, Babyface, you always thought it didn't look like he was going to come back. But when it became, when you saw the tweets and it said that he was going to the Red Sox, what was your initial feeling, your reaction there?
Yeah, just, end of an era, right? I mean, I think we had mentioned prior in the offseason, you'd heard some interviews that he had done, and you didn't hear that confidence in his voice, kind of like, yeah, it's going to happen. I'll be back, kind of like any type of positive feeling. It was kind of like, we'll see what happens. It's a business, he had that impression already, kind of knowing, what, I may not be there next year. Right. And I think I mentioned to you guys, if he would have not signed anywhere and it would have been like mid-January, then I think, he would have came back, like Dylan, we were talking about Dylan, on Andrew's terms. Right. And I think JT, he still feels he has some baseball in him, and he took that 2-year deal. I think it's a 1 year and a player option for the second year or something like that, right? But yeah, when I first saw when I saw the Dodgers sign JD Martinez, right, that was kind of like, okay, that really, really limits now the chances of JT coming back, and that's kind of what was going around that day. And then the next day, JT's going to Boston, and when you think about it, Boston seems like a good spot for him, right? As far as familiarity, because Kike's there, Verdugo's there, Kenley's there. He's good buddies with those guys. And if you saw Kike Hernandez, socials on Instagram, I mean, it's just, he's not saying, "Hey, JT signed," but he's posting every picture he can find of him and JT together. So Kike Hernandez is pretty happy that JT's heading to Beantown.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was bummed when it became a reality. There was a part of me that wanted to just focus on the baseball aspect of it, because I really think what it came down to, and I know you and I have had this conversation off the air, but I think what this came down to was the fact that what happened, I think it wasn't a matter of the money. I don't think the money was an issue. I think what it was playing time. I think it was like, this is a guy, I think, who still feels like he could play. And the Dodgers have different plans. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, where I think they really want to find out what they have with these young kids. And the only way they're going to find that out is by actually giving them playing time. And I don't know if you can do that if you have Justin Turner on the squad, because I think Justin Turner wants to play third base. I don't think Justin Turner wants to DH. So I think that's what it came down to. I think the second year also was probably a deal breaker. We heard Ned talk about it with Nick Punto and some of those other guys. They wanted 2 years, and it's just, you would think, and I saw this comment a lot on social media, hey, what's the extra year? Just go ahead. Again, for me, I really don't think money was the issue. It's the roster space. Because now, I mean, we saw this when it happened with Edwin Rios. It was a numbers game, right? Like, Edwin Rios couldn't get back on the roster after he got hurt because it was a numbers game. You had to go with these guys. You had to go with them. So I think it was just, it finally sunk in that, damn, he's not going to be here anymore. And we went over it with Ned in terms of, all the great playoff moments. It just would, but to me, it's the stuff off the field. It's who Justin Turner is. That's what I'm going to miss, because that guy was really a good dude. And we had a pleasure. He came on the show. Him and Kourtney came on the show. They brought their dog. Check out that episode. We had a lot of fun talking with them, and he was just very loose and he was so laid back. And it's like, you thought you were, to me at least, it felt like I was just talking to some guy in some sports bar, that I wasn't talking to a major leaguer, so that bums me out a little bit. It made me think, and this is going to happen all the time. For me, it took me back to when Valenzuela was let go by the Dodgers, when they didn't I didn't know what to do with myself, because at that point I'm just sitting there going, Valenzuela's not on the Dodgers anymore, but Valenzuela is the reason why I was a Dodger fan. I'm sure older Dodger fans felt the same way when Steve Garvey left. Steve Garvey left, and 2 years later, he had the show pods in the World Series. So maybe Justin Turner does have more baseball in him, and maybe he is, but I just think this was a numbers game. And the fact is that JD Martinez isn't going to take at-bats away from Miguel Vargas. Having Justin Turner on the team is going to take at-bats away from Miguel Vargas. And that, to me, is what it comes down to. You need to know what you have with Miguel. Because if he is a guy who's going to pan out, or do we need to figure out if he's going to be a trade chip, come late July, early August?
Yeah. Then that's what it boils down to, is having Turner on the roster, does that take away at bats from Miguel Vargas? And it does, right? And same thing with Rios, like you said. If Rios would have been brought back, they would have had to put him somewhere, right? Likely third base, DH, same situation. That's going to take away at bats from Miguel Vargas. And I think they really want to take a look at Miguel Vargas. I mean, is it going to be at third base? Probably, yeah. He'll probably get time there with probably Muncy, and probably in the outfield. But they're going to probably, he's probably going to be in there a good chunk of, at least to start, that's to start the season. He's going to be probably in everyday lineup. So, like you said, it's sad to see JT go, because what what he meant to the team, to the community, right? I mean, just that's like you're saying, that's the bigger part of JT. Is like he's one of those players, to me at least, when you think about like the Dodgers or you think of LA history players, right? Going back to the Dodgers, right? When you think back Valenzuela back in the 80s, Garvey, right? Those iconic players that you put them with teams, Lakers, Magic, Kobe, Shaq, right? Those guys that just stood out. Justin Turner is one of those guys for the Dodgers, right? You say Justin Turner Dodgers in the 2000s, right? 10, from 2015 or 14, whatever it was, to now, right? He's one of those guys that's just going to stick out as a Dodger, and you're going to always remember him as a Dodger, no matter what he does now with his last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to read Bill Plaschke's article on Justin Turner, but he had a very interesting, I think it's part of the headline, where he just says Justin Turner was not the greatest Dodger, but it's what you want. It's who you wanted a Dodger to be, is what Justin Turner. I mean, the guy was just, he showed up, he did his job, he performed, he was never a problem. You never had any off the field issues. He wasn't a distraction. The guy, I mean, the stuff that he did, he won the Roberto Clemente Award, the stuff that he did for veterans, the Justin Turner Foundation. The guy was just, he was a solid dude. And you had mentioned it, you brought it up with Ned too. Kourtney became also a very prominent person in this community, and you just associated the two of them. I saw a tweet that kind of made me laugh. Now that Kourtney's gone, is who's going to be the leader of the Dodger wives? Because that's kind of how you saw that. You saw Kourtney as she was the one that was leading the Dodger wives. So it's funny how this move was just felt through everywhere. Even the casual fan I ran into was just like, man, I get it, Bellinger's gone and the other ones, but the Justin Turner one just seemed to hurt more. And I can only compare it to Valenzuela. I can compare it to, what those guys went through with Garvey. It made me think of when Jackie Robinson got traded to the Giants. He retired rather than play for the Giants, so it eventually everything comes to an end. Our favorite Dodger players, I know people don't want to, and we're going to get probably crap about this also in the comments section, where it's just like, why are you guys thinking of hypotheticals? Deal with the now. Well, the reason why we deal with hypotheticals, is so we can appreciate the now. And so we have Kershaw for one more year. And I feel like I say this at the beginning of every year. Appreciate Kershaw, guys, because I don't know how much longer we're going to have him. I mean, I see these all the time. I know Austin Barnes. I think he and Austin Barnes are the longest tenured Dodgers now. But now that there's less and less Dodgers that he played with on the team, do you think the chances are that Kershaw's going to ride off in the sunset or maybe go over to Texas if they keep signing players the way they're doing?
Yeah. Last thing on the Kourtney JT thing. They have a podcast, right? Kourtney does, right?
Yes.
You know what episode they're at? They're at episode 99.
What's that?
So they're at episode 9. So their 100th episode. I think I have a pretty good idea what that show is going to be about. So that's going to be a pretty good episode to check them out. It's probably going to be their goodbye to LA or something. So that might be something to check out. I think they timed that pretty perfectly right there. But yeah, I mean, we got to appreciate Kershaw. I think Kershaw wants another title with LA, right? He wants another title bad with LA. He wants to win a title. To end all the talk, of the shortened season stuff. Get the title in a full season. Get the parade that we didn't get, and maybe he would ride off into the sunset. Or, maybe he has that itch to pitch for his hometown team. I mean, there's a lot of guys that want to do that. They just want to, hey, this was my team. I at least want to play a season with them, just to do it. To me, like I mentioned, to me, that'd be, it'd feel kind of like that's a shame that he's going to put on another uniform, but I understand why he would do it. For us, like I said, we want to see Kershaw as a Dodger, that's it, and never put on another uniform. Well, the only other uniform he's going to put on is the WBC uniform, if you want to talk about that as well. This week we learned that he will be in, and he had mentioned it prior a couple of weeks ago that he was kind of feeling it out and seeing if everything's going to line up, and it has. So he's going to be a part of that team. So that's going to be something definitely worth checking out. That USA team is loaded. I mean, they are loaded. For the first time, they are loaded. And it's crazy to think that they won the last WBC, right? So they're the defending champions, but this team is loaded. That team was nowhere near what this team has, and this team is loaded. Just like all the other teams that come in, Puerto Rico, the Dominican are always loaded. USA is loaded this year, so it's going to be a fun WBC.
Yeah, and I saw the comments already. I know people are nervous that Kershaw's going to pitch in the WBC, that they think it's risky. Look, it's anybody who plays in this thing, it's going to be risky. It's the same risk that they're taking in spring training. You could get hurt in spring training. You can't prevent injury. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I'm just going to say this out to everyone out there. Just think about it. It's not like Kershaw's going to go and throw 100 pitches in these games. Like Babyface just said, this team is loaded. They don't need Kershaw to pitch 6 innings. If Kershaw goes out there and pitches 3 or 4, they've got enough depth on this team that they can get through it. So I'm not worried that Kershaw, if he gets hurt, it's going to be because of overuse in the WBC. If Kershaw gets hurt, it's just going to be because Kershaw's got a lot of miles on him, and whether it was in the WBC or in spring training, he was going to get hurt anyways if he ends up getting hurt. I just don't think you can prevent that. Last thing before we move off of Justin Turner, what is going to be your last image? Like, if I say to you, Justin Turner on the Dodgers, what is the one image that you think of?
It's probably got to be like those walk-offs, the walk-offs in the playoffs, the walk-offs against the Cubs. I think those. I think prior to that walk-off against the Cubs, I'm trying to remember. There was another iconic home run, the first one where he kind of did this, but it wasn't in. I don't know if it was in the playoffs, right? That's the one that I based. I had the Rojo Chingon shirt. That's the one that I based that off of. I think that was. I'm trying to remember when that was. I think it was probably the year before the walk-off against the Cubs. But that's what you remember, those big hits, the walk-off, and like Ned mentioned, that play against the Braves in the NLCS, right, where no outs, they had what was the first and second, no, bases loaded, right? It was bases loaded, I think, and they get that double play. They get Swanson at going home. And then they get the third out. They get the second out at third base. So those big plays is what you're going to remember JT for on the field. Just stepping up and being clutch.
Yeah, that to me, that's when I think of Justin Turner, I think of that. I think they made it a bobblehead too, where it's just the image of him pulling a Superman to make that tag, and that was huge. I mean, again, I have to remind everyone, the Dodgers were down 3-1. In that series. So you needed plays like that to be able to come back to it. So it is very sad. I mean, when he does come back to Dodger Stadium, I mean, the guy's going to get a standing ovation. I think it's a foregone conclusion. Everyone believes that Justin Turner's going to come back once he's actually done playing to be a part of the organization. I hope that's true. I think he is only a benefit if he, in any capacity that he works in this organization. So, go ahead.
Sadly, you know how now every team will play every team this year?
Yeah.
But the Dodgers will play the Red Sox, but they're playing them in Boston.
Yeah.
So if you want to see JT come back close to LA, I'm sure he'll be in Anaheim. So, if people want to head on down there and show your support for JT when that happens, just make that trip down to Anaheim.
Yeah, he'll get a nice round of applause when he comes down to Anaheim. Is there anything that stood out to you from what Ned was talking to us about?
Yeah, just that character. Like I said, that's what kind of like. I mean, you have no way of knowing this guy. He gets let go by the Mets, right? And then you pick him up just to be a utility guy, just depth, right? I mean, what he became, right? Just what he became to the Dodgers, the city. I mean, he said, he saw who he was as a character, the character he had, right? And he believed in that person and the character, the type of person he was. But just to see how he developed as a player, right? Like I said, just became one of when you think of the Dodgers from that time frame. Justin Turner is like one of the top guys you would think of. You'd be like Kershaw, Justin Turner, right?
Yeah, no, for me, what I find really interesting, and you brought it up, was the last time the Dodgers did a youth movement was when Ned was in charge. It was when you had Matt Kemp, Andre Ethier, Russell Martin, James Loney was there, and Billingsley. And I mean, you had that young crew, and it set up, this run that it seems like it's coming to an end. But if this next group of players, if they hit on these guys, Ned said it, you could set up another playoff run for another decade. And that would just be absolutely crazy. Ned is not the only one that has said this to us. A lot of former Major League Baseball players that come on this show always tell us the same thing. It's hard to win. It is hard to win. If the Dodgers do set up another run with this young batch of players that'll be around together for a while, I mean, that's going to be insane. That could be 20 years of having competitive baseball, which is something that this organization has never seen before.
Yeah. And I think that's something, too, that a lot of fans are worried about because there hasn't been that many moves. They haven't seen them kind of spend. They've seen everybody kind of just going on this spending spree, right, and paying, $300 million to players. And the Dodgers aren't doing that. So they're worried that this year is going to be, like a down year, and the Dodgers are still going to be competitive. And one thing we've learned is the Dodgers don't need to win the NL West, right? And they don't need to win the NL West by like 20 games. If they win the NL West, cool, but they don't need the NL West. They need to get into the playoffs, right? And they need to get into the playoffs. And if it's in the wild card series, best 2 out of 3, so be it, right? They're in, and if they're hot, and they play, and they need players to perform in the playoffs, right? That's what we've always said. They need guys that are going to step up in the playoffs. And they signed JD Martinez. JD Martinez has been a good postseason player. So that's a step in the right direction, right? It looks like Andrew Friedman is looking for guys that have a track record that are going to be producing when it comes to October. So they've got one in JD Martinez now, so we'll see what they keep on adding to that.
Yeah, I find it very interesting because JD Martinez was a name that I had heard before this offseason, always linked to the Dodgers, that the Dodgers were looking at JD Martinez. And I know there were some concerns that signing JD Martinez, well, the only thing he can do is play DH. That guy he can't play the field. He's going to be your DH. So if he's your everyday DH, that means you're not. There were a lot of times the Dodgers last year had Will Smith as the DH and Austin Barnes catching. So you're not going to see that. To people who think that, I will say this. JD Martinez kills left-handed pitching. I, in my opinion, see a lot of lineups where JD Martinez hits against left-handed pitching and maybe sits against right-handed pitching, and then you will see that Will Smith in the DH spot with Austin Barnes catching. So I don't think you lose any of the flexibility that the Dodgers had before, but we mentioned this before. What it does do is JD Martinez doesn't take at-bats away from Miguel Vargas. It doesn't take at-bats away from any of these younger guys who, when they are playing, they're going to be playing in the field. They're not going to be DHing. Maybe occasionally we saw Miguel Vargas DH last year, maybe, but that was just to get him in the lineup. With Justin Turner not there, and you don't have to worry about JD Martinez playing in the field, if Miguel Vargas is playing, he's going to be playing in the field and his bat's going to be in the lineup. So I don't think you got him for 1 year. Anything you get out of JD Martinez, in my opinion, is gravy. And if he ends up performing the way historically he does in the playoffs and the Dodgers get to the playoffs, then that's a plus. That signing is not something that bothered me at all. I know people think, well, because we signed JD Martinez, we lost Justin Turner. Look, we went over that, people. The Justin Turner thing is a numbers game. We had talked last episode about with Syndergaard. I mean, I think people are pretty confident that Mark Pryor is going to turn Syndergaard around. He made his press conference. Babyface, you were there. What was there anything that Syndergaard said that caught your attention?
Well, I mean, he said because last year he was first season back from Tommy John, so his velocity was down, right? And this is Syndergaard. You know, we're used to seeing this guy throwing over 100. And he did say that he feels that there's no reason that he shouldn't be throwing 100 this season. So he feels like he can get back to that velocity. And he said, I mean, one of the reasons he came here is because whoever the Dodgers touch basically turns to gold, right? The Dodgers have that Midas touch. He saw what they did with Heaney. He saw what they did with Anderson. So he wants to be that next guy. He wants to be that next guy and show that, you know, he can do it and prove himself and bet on himself and get back to the Syndergaard that we've known. And interesting too, he said that he's dreamed about being a Dodger. Like ever since he came to Dodger Stadium in 2015, he'd hear the crowd, he'd just feel that atmosphere in Dodger Stadium, and he loved pitching there, and he wanted to be a Dodger. So that was kind of surprising too. You know, I never figured that he wanted to be a Dodger. But, you know, that's what he said. And he also said at the end of the month, he'll be heading down to Arizona, and he's going to start. He's going to start getting ready for the season, you know, at the Dodger facility, working with the coaches. So I'm looking forward to see what he's going to do. You know, I definitely believe Mark Pryor can, you know, turn around guys. You know, we've seen it. And, you know, if he does it again with Noah Syndergaard, I think Mark Pryor should definitely be getting some kind of end of year award as well.
That's right. I mean, the funniest thing to me about that press conference and going into that press conference, I know you had made a big deal about it. You were putting it on the socials, was they had listed him as number 34. And I know there were some rumblings.
It's still there by chance. It's still there. So it's still kind of nervous on that.
But he said he's going to wear 43. But I will say this, if he wore 34 and he talked about he couldn't wait to be a Dodger because of the crowd, let me tell you, if he came out there with the 34, and I'm not saying everybody at Dodger Stadium, but I think there would be a good number of people that would be like scratching their head going, what the hell is this guy wearing number 34, you know, going out there. So I thought that was funny. We had mentioned that Kershaw is going to be joining the WBC. He was recently the American team in the WBC. He was recently interviewed by Alana Rizzo, and he made a comment, and it's a favorite topic for you loyal listeners on this show, that he had told Alana that he feels that Julio Diaz doesn't get enough respect. And I guess we got into a little bit of a kerfuffle with some of our listeners last week, again, because we deal with too much hypotheticals on this show. But we had said when we were talking with Dylan, actually, that, you know, we are concerned that the Dodgers are not going to re-sign Julio Diaz, or that Julio Diaz is not going to want to re-sign with the Dodgers. But now when you hear Kershaw say that Julio doesn't get the respect that he deserves, I feel like this Julio thing is going to be a storyline. He's going into a free agent season. If Julio is successful, and we talked about this off the air, Babyface, if Julio ends up winning the Cy Young, I mean, his price is just going to go through the roof. And this is going to be my concern. The Dodgers aren't spending money. The speculation is they're saving all this money to sign Ohtani. It seems like Ohtani's going to be their priority. How is Julio going to react to that? How is Julio going to see it? Be like, oh, okay, you guys are more than willing to pay Ohtani, but I've been a consistent performer. I won you guys a World Series. And again, I'm going to take a back seat. You know, Greg Berman of ESPN LA was on the show throwing out this theory, saying that he feels that Urias isn't happy with the Dodgers, and he attributes it to maybe the Dodgers prefer or give preferential treatment to Buehler over Urias. And maybe this is all just a completely crazy narrative that is completely asinine. But it just seems, and I know you feel this way, that Julio just doesn't, it's like he's a backup plan to everything. And if the Dodgers don't sign Ohtani, and then they turn all their attention to Urias and be like, okay, we're going to give you, how is Urias going to take that? Oh, you only want me because you couldn't get Ohtani.
And, to that of being hypothetical, it's not really a hypothetical. Yes, he's a free agent next season, but they could sign him now. You're right. They could extend him now. I mean, yeah, it's probably not going to happen because of his agent, Scott Boras, right? He wants to take all his guys to free agency and get them as much money as they can. So, non-hypothetical, it could happen tomorrow, right? He could get extended. But, like we were saying, the things that we have mentioned, like, hey, he should have won the Cy Young, this year, or he should have been in the running last year. He had the most wins, over last couple of seasons, he's right up there, most wins, best ERA, right? These are the things that Scott Boras is going to take to the bank next year when he's talking to teams. Hey, my guy has the most wins in MLB over, this span, his ERA, top ERA over this span, right? That's what he's taking out there, but yet it wasn't good enough this season for him to even get second place in the Cy Young Award, right? He got third. So those are the things, that you're going to be hearing next at the end of, and at the end of this coming season with Julio. And, we want Julio back. I mean, nobody can say we don't want Julio back, but we want him to be a priority as well, right? Because, when you saw Rodon get 6 years, what did he get? Like 180? Something like that, right?
160 something, didn't he?
Okay, yeah. So he's up. So what's Julio gonna get?
Yeah.
What are you gonna offer Julio? He's gonna be what, 27, 28, going into his free agent year, some would say right into his prime, right? What are you gonna give him? It's gonna be a 10-year deal, 12-year deal.
What is he? Is he he's like 24 right now, right?
I think he's. Let me just double check real quick.
Well, while you're doing that, and I before I know I'm going to see this comment on the social media. Well, why can't we sign them both? Look, Ohtani's going to require it. The growing trend right now in baseball is these long contracts. So there's rumors that he's going to want a 10-year deal. Okay, so let's say you give Ohtani a 10-year deal, and then Julio's going to want a long contract. So right now, the bare minimum is 6 years, right? Because that's what Rodon got. So Urias, who's younger than Rodon, is going to at least want 6 years. Yeah. If he's around 24, 25, do you have the number yet?
He's 26. He'll turn 27 in August. So he'll be 27 when he hits free agency. 27 is super young for a pitcher the caliber of Julio Urias to be hitting the free agent market, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, a 10-year deal takes him to 37, right? You got Scherzer and Verlander pitching into their 40s right now. So what type of deal is Julio going to get realistically? It's got to be over 10 years, right?
I don't know if it's going to be over 10 years. I can see them doing an 8-year deal. I can see them taking him to 35, but bare minimum 6.
But that's the Dodgers.
Yeah.
What's a team like the Mets, the Padres, the Yankees?
There you go. The show pods. That's the team. That's the team that makes me nervous. That will overpay to get Julio. And not just because he's a good pitcher, but business-wise. Because there is a belief that there's some people that feel that the Dodgers, in terms of marketing, have not really marketed Julio in a correct way. You don't think the show pods would love to market to the border town there? Look who we have here, Julio Diaz. Come here, come see Julio. I mean, if that happens, it's just going to be so disappointing to see that the show pods are able to market Julio. But again, these are hypotheticals, and I get it. You guys don't want us talking about this stuff. So, but it's just something to think about. And it just crossed my mind in the fact that the Dodgers aren't spending any money They seem to be saving it. It seems to be Ohtani who they're targeting, but they got another free agent pitcher who's pretty damn good, who's going to want to get paid too. So I'm just curious as to what goes in all what he's thinking about all this stuff. But I buried the lead there, babyface, before we end the show. The Dodgers finally dealt with Scott Boras. You know, when we had Dylan Hernandez on the show, he had mentioned that the Dodgers have not really dealt with Scott Boras. Well, JD Martinez is a Scott Boras client. So the Dodgers maybe they're setting the groundwork and just, you know, hey, Scott, we got one of your clients on. Maybe help us with Julio. I'm hoping that's the case.
And they got him cheap, too. $10 million is cheap for JD Martinez.
Yeah.
I mean, Migallo got 11 with the Twins. So Dodgers got to deal with JD Martinez.
And JD Martinez put up better numbers last year than your Gallo. So we're going to end the show because we got Christmas coming up. We see these lists all the time on social media. So the Carne Asada wants to put on their own list here, and that's going to be in terms of our top 5 Christmas foods. And before we go into the Christmas foods list, though, Babyface, are you a guy who celebrates on Christmas Eve? Or do you celebrate Christmas Day?
So, growing up with my family, you know, we'd go to visit some friends' family house every year, right? We'd go there Christmas Eve. Everybody would bring their gifts and just put, you know, hundreds of gifts under the tree. You know, strike of midnight. Everybody, boom, here's a gift, and everybody just opened up their gifts, right? So I did that all growing up. Once I got married, became a parent. That switched over now to Christmas morning, in part because it'd be 12 o'clock. We're in here wrapping up gifts, getting all the gifts, getting them under the tree, right? Getting Santa Claus making the delivery and putting everything under the tree. So we've switched to Christmas morning. I kind of like the Christmas morning now because when I think back, I'm like, hey, man, there's nothing for us to do on actual Christmas Day, right? Because by 12:15, you know, we've opened up all our gifts. So now kind of wait till the morning, and you know, kids get up early and then they go to the tree and you know and do their thing. So Christmas morning now.
Well, I am a Christmas Eve guy. We celebrate Christmas Eve. We stay up until midnight. We open all the gifts. So we stay up late Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day we basically it's like a hangover. We just sleep in, and then when we wake up, we play with our toys. As an adult, it's kind of what you said. We got nothing to do. You know, we already partied the night before. So it is just a super lazy day on Christmas Day. But we are Christmas Eve people. So we celebrate on Christmas Eve. I want to get over into this top 5 Christmas foods, Christmas Day foods. Do you want to go first, or do you have your 5?
I don't know if I have 5. I mean, just the one that I think is like the food for, you know, all Latinos and Mexicans, right? Is the tamales, right? The tamales,
yes.
Right? And you know, so I am Mexican and Guatemalan. So I grew up with the Guatemalan tamales. I don't know if you've ever had the Guatemalan tamales.
Yes. My girl is Guatemalan, so she introduced me to the Guatemalan tamal. So
as you can see, it's made differently, right? It still has the wrap, but it's not the corn leaf.
You
wrap.
use the green. You use the green leaf.
The banana leaf. It's a banana leaf. So the tamale is really soft. It's really soft and moist, and then you have the meat in there, so it's really soft. And that's what I grew up on. Those Guatemalan tamales. You know, Christmas morning. You know, my mom would make the breakfast, you know, eggs, whatever, and just the tamal, right? The Guatemalan tamale. And that's what I grew up on. And, you know, the Mexican tamale, we also make a version of that, but we call those chuchitos. So they're like smaller tamales. They're smaller, you know, the same thing in the corn, but we call those chuchitos. But then you know, now I do get the Mexican tamales, but it's kind of hard to find a place. Like I don't really have a go-to place for those. You know, there's a place right here I live in Chino, so there's a place, some restaurants, but they're kind of some years they have them, some years they don't. This year I haven't had a tamale yet, so it doesn't even feel like it's Christmas time yet because I haven't had one yet. So it's kind of odd. So, but that I mean, it's pretty much it. That my top five is like one thing. It's tamales, Guatemalan tamales.
Okay, well, tamales are on my top five. Actually, tamales is number one on my list, and in particular, I'm a big fan of los de puerco, the puerco with the red sauce. But I'm also a big fan of the green sauce tamal with chicken, de pollo. I'm a big fan also. I love all tamales, but I'm a big fan of los de rajas, which is the jalapeno and the queso. So tamales is number one on my list. Number five on my list, it seems like I only drink this at Christmas time, is atole. I'm not sure how many of our listeners are fans of atole, but to me, Christmas represents... It's atole. That's the only time you want to drink atole for me is on Christmas. And number four, my favorite dessert, and I seem to always eat this around Christmas time, are buñuelos. Have you had buñuelos before?
Yeah, at that house that I told you that I grew up going to, she would make buñuelos every Christmas Eve too, and we'd have those there. Yeah.
Yeah, buñuelos are fantastic. Number three. Oh my gosh, I think I just lost my number three. I don't have a number three, so maybe it's just a top four. So let me restart this. Top four is atole. Three are buñuelos. Two is pozole. I have to have pozole on Christmas. Christmas Eve. It's fantastic. My tia Leticia makes this green pozole. I know there's the red, but for me, I'm a person who prefers the green, and I love the cabbage on top of it, or repollo. Or when I was a kid and they used to send me to the store and I didn't know how to say repollo in English, and I would call it chicken. I would just put that on there. But number one, as we mentioned, is the tamal. That is the number one Christmas food for me. Yeah. So we have a top four. Actually, we'll combine. We'll add your five.
Actually, I could add two and three. Pozole too.
Okay.
I get the pozole, the green pozole. I prefer that over the red and even over menudo. I'm not a big menudo fan, so I like the green pozole. And I forgot everybody's favorite pan dulce, right? You gotta have some pan dulce, right?
Okay, so all right. So let's do that then. We'll make pan dulce our number five. I'm including your Guatemalan tamales in the tamale list. So the Bleed Los Podcast official Christmas food list goes as follows. Are you okay? Do you want to put buñuelos? Do you want to? No, atole has to be five. Atole has to be five because of those five, atole is my least favorite.
Now, atole is kind of like a hot chocolate, right?
Yeah.
I remember
not necessarily a hot chocolate, but yeah,
some it's a bit hot, right?
Yeah,
and like, do they have like butter or something like that in it, or something like that?
Go ahead and vamp. I want to see what the actual ingredients are because there's different atoles, right?
Because I just remember as a kid, I think drinking that. And the next thing I knew, it was coming out. So I kind of have stayed away from that.
Well, because they have, like, you can have an atole de elote, you can have an atole de chocolate, but it's basically a hot drink is what the atole is. But to me, it's my least favorite. But if I'm gonna drink it, you're basically drinking liquid flour is what you're drinking with atole, right? So that to me is my least favorite Christmas food. 4, do you want to go then with buñuelos?
You do buñuelos, yeah.
And then 3, pan dulce. And then 2, pozole. And number 1 is tamales. Is that the official Bleed Los Pod? That is the carne asadas list for top Christmas foods.
Yeah, and some, like I said, my favorite are the Guatemalan tamales, and it's usually pork in those. And then as far as the Mexican ones, I like chicken or cheese. Those are my top 2 on that side.
Do you like the rajas? Do you like the ones with jalapeno in it, or just cheese?
No, it'll get too spicy for me sometimes.
There you have it, everybody. So, Merry Christmas, everyone, because by the time you guys are listening to this episode, we're going to be very close to Christmas. And who knows when you listen to this episode. You might listen to this episode on Christmas Day. So, Feliz Navidad, everyone. I don't think Ned was far off when he said that Justin Turner is going to be one of those historical Dodgers, where I think Turner is going to be looked at in the same way as like a Steve Garvey, in that Justin Turner represented, especially for this period of Dodgers, he represented the Dodgers. So we want to thank everyone. Again, if you're not subscribed to the podcast yet, subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us spread the word. Tell everyone. Let them know about the Bleed Los podcast and the Carne Asada. Because, you never know who's going to show up on the Carne Asada. So, yo he sido su servidor, Juan Ramírez. Y de parte de mi colega Babyface, les deseamos una feliz Navidad. Y nos vemos para la próxima. This episode of the Bleed Los podcast has been brought to you by Bet Online, where the game starts.